What's up, gangsters? Welcome back to another edition of What the Heck Is That? And in this edition, we're talking about the glute hamstring developer. Now, we're going to talk about what this thing is. We're going to talk about why we want you to use it. We're going to talk about how you should use it. And we're going to talk about things to avoid while using it so you don't hurt yourself. Let's dive into what this thing is. This is a glute hamstring developer. Your glutes and your hamstrings. It's meant to develop those bad boys. But when we think about it as CrossFitters, we usually think of people doing G.H.D sit-ups on it. What I want to give you guys today is an understanding of not only what this machine is, how to set it up, but also how to progress through it so that you don't hurt yourself while you're using it or overdo it. This is a very potent apparatus, and if dosed too fast, too soon, can lead to a thing called rhabdomyolysis, which I might talk about later. The glute hamstring developer is meant to work the core musculature. And the core musculature makes up, and this isn't an exhaustive list, but what we're thinking of with the G.H.D are the abdominals, the spinal erectors, the psoas muscle that runs from your spine to your hip flexor, and then your rectus femoris, which is the main quad muscle that runs down the leg. We also work the glutes and the hamstrings. When we think of a way of building core strength, we think of the 9 foundational movements in CrossFit. Everything that we do there in a deadlift and a squat, we tell you to brace and to have an unchanging trunk, which means that I'm not going into extension or I'm not going into flexion. I'm staying neutral. If I were to put a box around this guy here, everything inside of this box would stay unchanging. In life, we're expected to and like to go outside of those ranges of motion, which is why we like the G.H.D and something that those 9 foundational movements don't allow us to do. In the G.H.D, we could go through a range of motion that's a little bit past neutral. We see this in the G.H.D sit-up when we're leaning back, but we also see it in things like taking a soccer ball from out of bounds and throwing it inbounds, for example, or putting our luggage in the overhead compartment. We might lean back a little bit, but we're still maintaining a good level of engagement in the abdominal muscles while we're doing that, which is what causes such a potent stimulus on the abdominals. If you've ever done a certain amount of G.H.D sit-ups, you know what I'm talking about. We love it and we want to use it because it works the core musculature and because it allows us to go a little bit outside of that perfect neutral position, which is really transferable to everyday life. But it also helps me as a coach have a common vernacular with my athletes in terms of flexion and extension. We see flexion and extension in areas where we can be injurious. We want to make sure that our athletes understand that when I say, hey, flex at the hip, or extend the hip, or flex at the spine, or extend the spine, that they understand how to do that so that when they're in a loaded environment, they're able to pull themselves out of those good or bad positions and into those good positions. Now, how do we use this thing and how do we dose it appropriately so we don't overdo it? First thing is that we want to start with actually the backside of the body, and it's with a Superman hold. What you'll do is come off of the G.H.D, you'll hold the Superman position, and you want to be able to accumulate about 25 to 30 second hold here before we dive into any dynamic movement. After that, this little chart I made over here is going to be, once you can hold that Superman, is going to be your progression. Start off with hip extensions while at the same time working ab mat sit-ups. The hip extensions is working the posterior side of the body and the ab mat sit-ups are working the anterior side of the body. We want to see that you could do about 25 reps of the hip extensions under a controlled movement pattern like you're seeing here. And we want to see that you can do 25 ab mat sit-ups in a controlled manner like you're seeing here. Once you can do both of those, you can move on to step B, which is going to be a back extension and a G.H.D sit-up to parallel. We want to see that our athletes can do 25 of these before we move on to C. The back extension is teaching our athletes how to move from a poor position back to a good position and what it feels like when they're in a poor position so they can self-correct themselves back to a good neutral spine. The G.H.D sit-up to parallel is starting to really tax what their abdominals can do, holding them in a neutral position, which has great transference to everything else we do. The final one, which is the Mac Daddy of them all, is the hip and back extension, followed by the G.H.D sit-up, full range of motion. Now, being able to do this movement that you're seeing here now, a G.H.D hip and back extension, and being able to do 25 of those at this pace that you're watching right now is damn near impossible. Now, if you ever are able to work yourself up to 25 of those G.H.D hip and back extensions at that pace, unbroken, I want video evidence, number one. And number two, good job. You've done something that probably less than 1% of the population can actually do. So it's less about being able to do 25 here and more about constantly shooting to try to be able to do 25. At the same time, that 25 G.H.D sit-ups, we got to make sure that the range of motion that we're going through is appropriate for our height and the apparatus that we're on. All G.H.Ds are made different. Some are tall, some are short. All humans are made different. Some are tall, some are short. The idea of touching the ground with your hands on the G.H.D sit-up was a standard made for competition, not for training. What we want to see is what you're seeing here. In the bottom of this position, we have a slight extension of the spine, but the abs are still turned on. What we don't want to see is what you see here, where the abs are turned off and the athlete is snapping themselves in half. This is one of the things that's going to really make your back not feel good the next day. Now let's dig into the things to avoid on the G.H.D. The first one is sitting yourself up too high on the G.H.D. What we want to see in the setup position, as far as forward and backwards goes with the G.H.D sit-up and the hip extension, is that our butt is slightly off the back of the pad or the hips are free of the pad. Then when we go to the back extension, we'll push the G.H.D back more and we'll trap the pad so that the hips aren't moving and only the back is moving. If we don't change it and we flip back over, we're going to have our hips on top of the pad. And when we lean back, we'll overextend over that pad, causing too much extension in the low back, and that can make the back hurt. Another thing that we can see is that you keep your knee bent. When we initiate this movement in the G.H.D sit-up from down to up, we want to see that the athlete fires the knee down. That's this rectus femoris muscle right here, initiating the movement coming up. If we don't do that and we see that the knee stays bent, what'll happen is the athlete will use mainly the psoas muscle to start to pull them out of that position, which is tugging on the low back and could cause some low back pain. And the final thing is just dosing this thing inappropriately, not following this progression that we've laid out for you here. If you have any questions about any of these things, please reach out to us individually. We're here for you. It's our job. And thank you so much for giving us the career of our dreams. I can't wait for the next edition of What the Heck Is That?